Hello, this is Abe, and welcome to the first initial podcast of Abe's entire Star Trek commentary of all episodes from the original series, ongoing through to Discovery, and every episode that will be coming on from here on in. I'm going to be starting this podcast with the first episode of the original series entitled The Cage. For a 60s show, this hasn't been too bad. I have to admit, it did take me a little longer to actually get into the series myself, but I did really enjoy the way that it did kind of introduce the characters, or some of them that would carry over into the mainstream original series, as well as the story which would actually come back in a later two-parter episode to be finished off. But without further ado, I'm going to start watching The Cage again. It's been a while since I've gone through the original series complete from start to finish. But this is something which I've been wanting to do for quite some time, and I am excited to be able to talk to you guys, anyone who may be listening, about my thoughts on the episode as it progresses. And each episode that I post up from here on in as well. So, from here on in, it's going to be talking about the original series episode pilot, The Cage. For an early 60s show, this was very good for its time, I do have to admit. The episode starts out with external shot of the Enterprise and the title theme done in a very 60s-like manner, and the Enterprise receiving a initial distress call. And in a very unlike Starfleet manner, Captain Pike chooses to ignore the distress call and continue on his original mission to the Vega colony. I can understand where he's coming from, given the fact that it was sent approximately 18 years ago. But even so, it should still, as a Starfleet rule, any and all distress calls should at least be investigated to determine survivors. The Vega colony had been attacked, and so there were sick and injured that needed to be attended to there. So the captain did have choice of priorities on that one, and I do think he did make the right choice, although not quite the one that that I personally would have made. I'm finding the technology used in this episode as well to be very amusing. We get our first look at the communicator, which the captain uses to contact the Doctor, and my two comments here. One, given how far technology has come from the 60s to 2019, when I am recording this, that is a very outdated form of communication. And secondly, that it appears the Doctor must have been in the cabin next door, considering how quickly he's able to arrive at the captain's cabin. It's an interesting conversation that Captain Pike has with the Doctor at this point as well. He's been the captain of the Enterprise for a while, an unspecified period of time here, but it's obvious that it's starting to wear on him. Because he's talking about leaving, talking about resigning, and other life paths that he may have chosen. But I like what the Doctor says. That you can either face life head on and deal with it, or you can try and essentially hide under a rock and hope that life doesn't bother you too much. And you never really have a choice. You do just need to kind of face life, because eventually it will come back and bite you. It does come and find you. But I do like that where this episode goes in terms of letting him explore what each of these options are like, so he can find out for himself what he is actually meant to be doing, what his destiny is, if you will. I love it how the captain kind of dig himself a bit of a hole here, and after finding out there are survivors on Talos for him to rescue, he does change course, so he does have that more information and makes a command decision to follow that up. And this is a bit of a humorous thing for me anyway. That he's, and granted a bit of a sexist comment as well, that he's not used to having women on the bridge. And one would think that, by the time, by the 23rd century that this is set in, that the captain, humanity would be more kind of gender neutral, if you will, that wouldn't be an issue. But it's, some of the issues of the era that it was written in terms of the 60s starting to kind of bleed through into the series. Just another point of interest. We get our first look at the transporter in this particular section next, and it's interesting to just see them as they kind of gearing up, for the landing party here, and it's something with there's a lot of, it's just, I love the 60s technology that that they're using, to try and show that, to try and be futuristic and whatnot, to try and demonstrate what this is like. I love the fact that they need a transporter pad to leave, but not necessarily one, but not a receiver pad to come in on, which really makes. There are others, other podcasts out there which go into the science of Star Trek, and a really good book out there too, I might add, which worth looking into on that one. But it's just so, in a lot of respects, unrealistic, because if you're gonna go be transferred electronically as the transporter does, you do need some sort of receiver, and you can't just materialize anywhere if this doesn't work. Not from a genuine kind of realistic basis, but it does make things easier getting from one place to another, rather than in other shows where having to transport by shuttle or other kind of craft to get from one place to another, which does tend to stretch things out longer. This was an easier way for things to happen, so I can understand it from a production standpoint, but from a realistic one, not so much. I also find it amusing that this is one of the only times in the series you'll see Spock smile. Granted, we don't know a lot about his race at this point, but it is funny when the more we learn about what Vulcans are trying to do. So they've encountered the survivors and have started to introduce themselves, and they've met the only woman that's a part of them, by the name of Vina, and they're just doing the initial kind of introductions, and we find out that they are being watched by a group of 3 aliens that will later come to know as the Telosian inhabitants, and they are currently being spied on. For what purpose at this point we don't know. Shortly after this, the captain and his crew are preparing the survivors to be rescued, to be beamed up, and he gets told that there's a secret to the survivors' longevity. So in order to find the secret out, he goes off alone with Vina, something which I'm surprised he doesn't take the doctor with him, given the fact that it is a kind of biology, how are they surviving kind of thing. But shortly after he is separated from his crew, everyone disappears, all the survivors and Vina, and the captain ends up being captured. I know that the captain did get tricked into being alone with her, but I do find it surprising that the doctor wasn't with him. It doesn't seem proper procedure under those kinds of circumstances, but it has led to the captain's capture, so that by the Telosian. So after being captured, his crew try valiantly to rescue him, firing phasers at the door, but apparently having no effect, and Spock delivers the crushing line, "We have lost the captain." As a bit of a side comment, I've always wondered what it is with these early TV shows, science fiction ones, that they feel that there should all be these stereotypical aliens and kind of big brains and silvery outfits and whatnot, because you see it in quite a number of different ones. And I just wonder what is the general thinking with with that. Also, just moving on to the next bit, the captain finds himself in a cage surrounded by other aliens or animals in their own individual cages. He tries to break the glass, much to his chagrin. It fails. At this point, I find it interesting to note as well that after the Telosians kind of enter and have their initial "we are the superior race" kind of repartee that tends to go along with these kinds of situations, that all the captain, that it's the captain's predictability, partially because of the Telosian's telepathy, but also because of the very nature as to who he is, that ends up causing him a number of problems. It's going to be interesting to see how that continues to play out with the rest of the episode. So I've just had the expositional briefing scene where they're discussing who the Telosians are and their various mental capacities, and see the Doctor gets it. And during this scene, the Doctor makes clear to everyone that due to the mental capacity of the Telosians, of the aliens that they've encountered, that they can create illusions out of thoughts, memories, desires, anything that is in the person's head. And he acknowledges the danger of what they're about to face. The rest of the crew doesn't really seem to care about this, from what I can tell, because they're still willing to essentially go on what could be a suicide mission, to try and put the ship's power against the gateway, if you will, the door to the Telosians' chambers or underground facility, which in my mind is just outright moronic, mainly because throwing that much power against anything would leave, could potentially leave a crater the size of, I don't know, Manhattan, just to pick a random place, if not larger, which could potentially kill the captain if they really wanted to do that. So trying to do something like that, not exactly the brightest of ideas. And yet still, number one, sure, let's go ahead and blow the hell out of the thing. So the Telosians, we're back to the captain. The Telosians have been scanning the captain's mind, and they pull up a recent battle that he had on his last away mission to Rigel 7. And at this time, instead of just fighting for his own life, they get him to fight for the woman, and the captain knows that it's Vina, the same woman who was originally an illusion before. I am a little curious as to kind of the point in this. I mean, I suppose it's to try and help build a stronger emotional attachment, because ultimately it seems that the Telosians still want these two together, and that sometimes a danger shared can sometimes bring two people together. I mean, they might have that kind of thinking, I suppose, but it's also, I suppose, to test out the captain's humanity as well as his aggression, and see how far he's willing to go to protect someone that he's that he has just met, real or not. So the illusion continues, and all through it, the captain initially doesn't realize exactly how real it is, thinks that it's just all in his head, so what? But Vina is telling him that regardless of whether it's in your head or not, you'll feel it, which is very true. He ends up saving the damsel in distress, and then returns back to the cage, only this time she is there with him, and he's questioning why, which is a very good question for him to be asking at this point. So Pike has just returned, or been released from the illusion he was just in, and Vina is still with him, and he's quite curious, understandably, as to why she is still there, as to whether or not this is she is another figure of his imagination, another illusion, and she is constantly trying to kind of probe him to try and get him to accept the situation, where he is, and to live out a dream that he has always wanted. The captain, Pike, is certainly understandable, suspicious of her motives as to whether or not she is even real. And I do find it, very interesting to note with this that, the captain, while not questioning his sanity, he is constantly trying to find a way out of the cage, that he's in, out of the zoo. Which is certainly understandable, because one thing that that we humans kind of treasure above all else is, freedom and our ability to kind of do what we want when we want. And the captain is not being given that opportunity. He's trapped. He's being studied. He's a lab rat, which is not something that that we'll care to be in very much, particularly not someone who is used to being in command of the situation. So the away team, in their attempt to rescue the captain, try to fire a big-ass laser cannon at the door, which spectacularly fails. And once again, the Doctor is the only one who seems to get it. It's an illusion. And, that they can't trust, anything that they're seeing or anything that they're feeling, because the power of the Talosians is too great to be able to clearly see what particularly what is going on. I'm finding the next conversation between Pike and Vina to be a lot more interesting. She offers to answer some basic questions about them, so that about the Talosians, so that he can start to understand them, start to see where they're coming from. And she gives some basic information. The bit which I'm finding interesting about this conversation, though, is how it is foreshadowing in a lot of ways what would happen in reality with us. Because what's actually happened with the Talosians is, yes, they used to live on the surface, and they used to kind of have normal, productive, creative lives, kind of, and not too dissimilar. I would assume to going to work and traveling the stars and whatever. But as their mental powers grew and they came to understand the power of illusion, they came to live in those illusions. And as can happen, that became their addiction. They didn't want to live, they didn't want to go to work. They didn't want to be productive in the physical, normal, usual sense. They just wanted to be productive in their minds. They wanted to indulge in these illusions, which, if you look at what's happening in society today with video games and with movies and various other forms of media entertainment, you see people walking around, and I freely throw myself in this as well, looking at their phones and spending hours upon hours in movie theaters and on Netflix and